In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the BBC's most infamous blooper, and acclaimed musician Mr. Webber was secretly a Thomas fan this whole time.
Oh, if you're new here and you love videos about lost media and obscure TV, then make sure you subscribe so you get more awesome content just like this. Right, with the context out of the way, let's start. All aboard!
Sit back and relax. This is a Scribbles to Screen production. Don't forget to follow Scribbles to Screen on Instagram, Facebook, and specially subscribe on YouTube.
In May of 1953, the BBC approached Eric Marriott, who was at the time the Railway series editor, to inquire for an adaptation of the Railway series books. The two that were specifically chosen was The Sad Story of Henry and Edward, Gordon and Henry, ideally to be featured with the Watch with Mother hour. Upon much negotiation, eventually the publishers came to an agreement that the BBC could indeed adapt the two stories, but using the 00 gauge Hornby models, to keep the TV adaptation visually faithful to the book illustrations. The models were supplied by P.R. Wickham's, previously responsible for creating the map of the island of Sodor. The broadcast was set to go live on Sunday the 14th of July, with the following episode preceding it 2 weeks later on the 28th. The story was extended to fit within a 10-minute runtime. Narrating the show would be Judy Lang, having prior success with The Listening with Mother. Additional elements within the live performance was a pre-recorded soundtrack that would play on top, enhanced Foley of real steam engine noises, background paintings that emulated the style of the book, and a special effect of superimposed rain. Although given that there was a month between negotiation and final broadcast, things didn't go down smoothly. The model set was hardly complete by the time of the first episode. The crack of the issues bled through. For one thing, the model trains were rather jerky when they were travelling along the tracks, which author and model train enthusiast Reverend Aldry was not too pleased with, being one out of many of his own critiques of the programme. Quoting Aldry, one of the biggest elementary mistakes, where the points on the tracks were not connected properly, causing the model train to derail. Thus a stagehand had to come in and correctly put the train back on the tracks while this was going out live. This was a major embarrassment from the BBC. Things would only further escalate. By Tuesday the 23rd, the story was widely reported in major newspapers, overshadowing major stories of the day, like the trial of John Christie. Because of the major attention, that week's episode was first delayed, then eventually the whole show got cancelled. Now of course, with the given knowledge that the BBC archives are rather spotty and fragmented, it's no surprise that a copy of this embarrassing live telecast has never resurfaced. And what makes this production more elusive is that there are no surviving photographs. So, alas, we have no window to see on what this production could have looked like. It's only TV guides and newspaper reports remaining as the only bit of evidence that this pilot did indeed once exist. If this wasn't attached to Thomas, then, well, it may have just been forgotten forever. In 1973, long-time Thomas fan Andrew Lloyd Webber, most famous for his composing work on countless of musicals, approached the publishers Kay and Ward for the permission to adapt the Railway stories into an animated musical series. The pitch seemed very promising, although from the book party there was much hesitation upon his agreements, as Webber wanted full control on the franchise. He disclaimed that this was a necessity to get full funding from the US market. This comment in particular made Wilbert very protective of the English iconology of his books.
Once the Americans get a hold of it, the whole series will be vulgarized and ruined.
After a year of negotiation, Wilbert finally signed the contract, giving him £500 in advance payment. Granada TV, an extension from ITV, was the company that was commissioned to create the pilot, with an investment of £10,000. Notably, animator Brian COSGROVE worked on the project. he would later on go and format the company COSGROVE Hall Films, mostly famous for their British animations, such as their shows as Danger Mouse and Duckula, and their adaptations of Noddy and BFG. The animation style was 2D, reportedly in the same vein as Ivor the Engine. Production was officially finished in early 1976, although the promised backers pledged out at the last minute, feeling that the Railway series just wouldn't have a mass appeal outside of the UK. To this day, only a behind-the-scenes photograph has reappeared. Granted, the design of the engines are very distinctive, to put it nicely, but who knows, maybe the execution more than made up for it. Webber would still have a really big fondness of the Railway series. In 1977, he formatted the Really Useful Group, an obvious nod to the Really Useful Engines. Approximately 2 years after the last Thomas pilot, Britt Allcross was in the midst of doing research on a documentary about UK steam engines. It was when that she was trying to get an interview with Wilbur Awdry that she became infatuated with the Railway series. Her research and curiosity eventually grew into an obsession, where she became determined to adapt the books into a TV series.
Has anyone ever talked to you about bringing these stories to life? And he said, oh, well, I think one time Andrew Lloyd Webber thought about it, but then nothing happened.
So after negotiating some of the rights for about an estimated £15,000, and spent the next several years conducting on the best art style to go for, 2D animation, stop motion, but it was when she was pointed into the direction of David Mitton that he suggested the idea to use live-action model railways. Fortunately for Allcross, he just so happened to own Clearwater Films, specialising in stop-motion commercials, so it was the perfect hub to create the models. To finance the pilot, Britt Allcross had to mortgage her house, raising about £50,000. The story to adapt for the pilot was Down the Mind. The pilot took about 3 weeks to film and was completed in April of '83. It was decided early on to make the series completely narration-based. Britt, spending several months trying to find the right narrator, was desperate to get former Beatle, Ringo Starr, to be that very voice. After writing and later meeting in person, Ringo was a little bit uncertain, as he was unfamiliar with the Railway series. Eventually, he agreed to read 5 of the stories and said to Britt, if you like them enough, then hey, get back in touch. Eventually, when the series was launched, he was signed on for 2 series. Down the Mind was later remade as the 25th episode of the first series. Notably, in the final episode, a shot from the pilot was repurposed. One can see an unpolished version of the Thomas model. The original Gordon model from the pilot was cleaned up to be a backup model for the main series, but in formal seasons it was stripped down to be a set dressing strap train. There's no argument that this is the most famous incarnation of Thomas the Tank Engine. It's a safe guess for anybody that was born after '85 that their first introduction to the franchise is, well, this series. Thomas has grown such a large following that the hardcore fans are referred to as Tankies. Whovians, Trekkies, you know a fan base is legit when they've got their own specified fan name. The so-called Tankies have noticed that during the 2010 remaster of the classic Thomas episodes, that there were several alternative and alternate shots that were used, a telling sign that the original 35mm source had to be rescanned and reconstructed to make the episodes truly HD. So, given this confirmation that the raw footage does indeed still exist, it's more than likely that the original pilot does indeed still exist. But will it ever be released? Well, as we learn from the Magic Railroad, never say never. There's still some more missing Thomas content, but that's another story for another time.
Hello there. You like sticking to the end as well? That's good. Look, there's so much to do. You've got similar videos to this one, and you could subscribe maybe. Yeah, just stretch my ego a little bit. It goes down these days. And yeah, there's not too much to do really, because this only lasts for about 20 seconds.